Hello and welcome back to the MSBaithak podcast. I'm your host Didi, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be talking about some of the changes announced for the upcoming seasons in F1. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready your opinions, and dive right in the conversation. Hello Vedant, it's been another weekend without F1, but it's been busy. We've had Formula E, we're gonna have IndyCar, we have IMSA, we have all the supercars, we have MotoGP, and the list goes on and on and on. So clearly not missing F1, but some news coming out of the paddock, and that is that a new qualifying format will be tried to push sustainability with less tire usage from 13 to 11 in two races in 2023. What do you think about it?
Interesting. I mean, it's obviously interesting to see again, Formula One trying new things, and I think the main issue would be the tire restriction, or the restriction on the tire sets and all those things, because it would
I
create.
mean, it has already been announced, in just in case, also for the benefit of the listeners. The new format says that, you'll have to use the specified compound in Q1, Q2, Q3. And for Q1, you need to use the hard compound. For Q2, you need to use the medium compound. And for Q3, you need to use the soft compound. And that is the direction that FIA, F1, and the teams are taking towards sustainability and spicing up the qualifying format, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it again, it would be interesting, if a midfield team can work the hard tires better than a front runner team, then the front runner team might be at a risk of losing out in Q1 potentially, right? So it's going to be interesting to see, because we know some teams struggle with some compound hard, depending on the hardness of the compound, whatever. So it's interesting. I don't think it would create that much of a difference at the end of the day, but it's going to be interesting.
I think personally, I haven't even thought about that much. Obviously teams struggle with tire warm up and things like that. And that will play into Q1 a lot more with hard tire compounds. But going into sustainability, I believe the teams that make it to Q3 use about 5 sets of tires, 6 sets of soft compound tires at the moment with the new regulations, and that would be cut short to 3 sets with this new format. But I just feel like it's not. It feels like an incomplete step even towards sustainability. Yes, you're cutting out 2 sets of tires, but it just doesn't seem that it's doing much for the sport. I mean, any incremental gain in sustainability is a gain, and that is to go for. But I think F1 can do better, and I have one idea for that. You want to increase the jeopardy. You want to test the drivers to the limit. Give them one set of hard compound tires for the entire qualifying Q1, Q2, Q3. That adds to how you use your tires, how well you can how far you can push those tires, and it just creates excitement overall. Obviously, we don't want to see F1 cars in qualifying on the slowest compound throughout the entire qualifying. But if you want to save on tires, I'm saving you 4 sets of tires for all teams almost. uh, you know and I'm making racing more exciting with this idea, in not racing but like qualifying more exciting, probably with this idea, because depending on, obviously, the hard tire is not supposed to wear out easily, right? It's supposed to give you performance, but tire warm up is going to be an issue throughout qualifying, and with changing conditions like we've seen, in Imola last weekend, and even other tracks like Australia, where the track got less and less greener and more rubbered in as the session went along. It will all come together and just become more of a challenge for all the drivers and teams. So I think if F1 is going to go and push that sustainability barrier, push it as far as you can, because we all know, uh, capitalize on this situation where all the teams and all the stakeholders are for change. They are all in. They're all ready to trial changes. They're all ready to go that step further. So push it as far as you can and then draw it back. Don't make an incremental step, in my opinion. And that is how I would approach it. But obviously, I don't know what the paddock thinks. I'm here out as a fan, so it's hard to say what is going on there. But I really wish F1 made a bigger step than what it is trying to make at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, what you said would be the most extreme step, I guess, just one compound, that to the hardest compound, and use it as you wish, basically. So that would be a very extreme step, but interesting nonetheless. But as of now, I mean, at the end of the day,
I mean, you don't have to use the hardest compound. Obviously, if you're going with C1, C2, C3, you'll probably likely use a C3 compound because the C1 won't survive. Let's say 10, 15 odd laps.
yeah,
But if you're going with C3, C4, C5, you might be okay. Using the C3 tire throughout qualifying for that particular track.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But once again, it's a very interesting and very extreme solution to, not a solution. I mean, there's no problem. There's no problem to begin with. It's just a way to improve sustainability and whatever that might be. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see how the trial goes next year.
Yeah, but it's only going to be two races, so we'll see what happens. And the other thing, obviously we were supposed to have 6 sprint races this year. That did not happen because of the budget cap and the teams not being aligned and whatnot. But the teams have signed off for six sprint races in 2023. However, this time it is the FIA that has put the plan on hold because it says, I believe what has been said is they need to evaluate whether they can support these many sprint races across the calendar year. And it has been speculated that there might be financial reasons too behind this. Now, if F1 is wanting to trial 6 races, obviously there is. I mean, the bottom line is there has to be some financial benefit for all the stakeholders if it is pushing a certain format more and more aggressively for almost 2 years now, right? So obviously we're not privy to the conversations, but again, there's a lot of speculation going on around this. Do you and I want more sprint races? Clearly not. I think we've discussed this plenty of times on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that the teams were not aligned before and are aligned now, and all these different storylines that have been going on is pretty confusing, and it's all part and parcel and the fabric of the politics behind the paddock in Formula 1. So who knows what would happen next? Nobody knows that until a vote is taken on this situation. But I mean, apart from us, I don't think most of the fans want 6 sprint races. I think 3 is enough, maybe extended to 4 if you are so desperate. But I don't think 6 or 7 sprint races are going to be good for Formula 1.
Yeah,
Because
and now talking about the big. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I was just saying, if you go for 6, then where does it end, right? If you want to stop it now, or otherwise you risk making the growth a factor.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it doesn't really do anything for me. People have said, make it half as long as the race distance. In that case, just make it 2 races, like, over the weekend. IndyCar does it. Why can't Formula One do it? And if you're already paying, you're already letting teams spend more money on sprint weekends. I think it's like $100,000 more or $150,000 more per sprint
Yeah.
weekend. So just give them a little bit more money for a full race. You
Yeah.
know, go all the
Yeah.
way if you're gonna do this.
Yeah,
But
it's strange where Formula 1 is going with this. It's totally strange.
but let's talk about the bigger changes. The bigger picture going into 2026, and that we will see another set of chassis regulation changes. Aero regulation changes and whatnot. Besides just the power unit, obviously we know that we're getting rid of the MGUH on the power unit side. The MGUK will be more powerful, up to 350 kilowatts, and we'll be using 100% sustainable fuels in the engines. But from what we've heard so far coming out of the paddock, we know that F1 is trying to create chassis rules that will make the car smaller, lighter, less draggy. We'll have car-to-car communication and even active aero probably. So the 6 things that F1 have outlined is, they want significantly reduced drag to improve sustainability and efficiency and complement the power unit characteristics. They want to maintain and improve on recent lessons learned about close racing and cars being able to follow each other, reduce car dimensions, reduce or contain car mass, continue path towards the standardization or simplification of strategically selected components for cost-cutting purposes, obviously, sustainability and continued innovation in terms of car safety. Now, there's obviously a lot of moving parts in this conversation itself. But to pick one by one, I feel the biggest factor in reducing the car weight, making it lighter and smaller, will be safety. With these faster cars, safety has been a big issue, which is why we have seen these cars get bigger and bigger. So it'll be interesting to see how F1 can innovate to make these cars smaller, but continue to make them more safer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, safer and smaller cars would be the base of this whole new regulations that they are going to build. Even, I guess, even the engine regulations would be constructed in a way that the engines might end up being a little smaller, compact, and end up in a smaller compact chassis basically. So let's see how that goes, because smaller cars will definitely improve racing at a macro level, at a broader level, right? And we have be it aero, be it racing space, racing lines, whatever, smaller cars will definitely improve racing. So that should be the primary goal.
Yep, definitely. And I want to pick up on this other thing. They want to make the cars less draggy. There is one issue with that, and which we have already seen already. If you make the cars less draggy, the streamline effect gets largely reduced, and they're trying to counteract that with obviously there's probably going to be some sort of sporting regulation to go with it. We've already talked about getting rid of the DRS, so we're going to have some sort of, with the increased electric power, we're going to have push to pass system or just the usual ERS, because we'll be regenerating more energy. So hopefully that will play into it.
Yeah.
But they've talked about active aero. Now, my biggest concern with that is the cost cap. In an era of cost cap, you're pushing the number of races, you are pushing sustainability, you're pushing new regulations every 3-4 years, and now you're saying active aero. And obviously, I don't know how it's going to play into the racing, but F1 has come out and said that it's going to greatly, obviously it's going to help with efficiency and the sustainability factors associated with going racing. However, how it's going to impact racing directly, they are positive about it because they have learned lessons from the changes they have made, and they're already collecting data and analyzing it in order to create the new regulation changes for 2026. But again, like I said, my biggest concern with the active aero is the cost cap. And again, I feel it's similar to having the active suspension that these teams were asking for when they learned about porpoising. So it all plays into it, right? And would the teams rather have active suspension than active aero? Who knows? So I believe getting agreement on the active aero might be a little difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange because the cost cap, I think it's still going down over the next few years. It's not stagnant right now. It's still going down, and with it's just the first year of these new regulations, so it will take 2 or 3 more years of development for the teams to converge at a point and be competitive enough. And then suddenly you introduce a new set of engine regulations and a new set of chassis regulations, which have active aero, which have active suspension, whatnot, and a completely different car, a smaller car, more compact car. So you have to look at cooling properly, and you have to look at safety features properly. Then there's the added headache of weight, minimum weight, and all that, which is currently going on. So it creates a lot of mess for the teams, I believe, and I don't know how they are going to come to a consensus and vote something through. And I believe that is where Formula One is trying to introduce those strategically selected uh, components, uh, the common components basically, to assess the cost cap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in no way, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing for Formula One to do. It is great that Formula One is trying to push boundaries. It's trying to do more with the cars. It's trying to make racing more competitive, and it's trying to make sure that the field is not dominated by a single team. And one way to do that is obviously to continue to change the regulations. But my concern is not that F1 is gonna take the wrong step, or they're doing too much or anything like that. It's great that F1 is doing all of this. My concern is that F1 might be pushing it a little too far to get consensus on all of these all together. I believe we were supposed to get a decision on the 2026 engine regulations by now, but it hasn't happened. The date has been moved further and further as we have as we have gone through the last season, and the season is very much underway. So, and we haven't seen a decision from Porsche or Audi because they're also waiting on the engine decision. And then you have to make sure that you get put the chassis regulations in place, I believe, at least a year in advance. So there is F1 might be taking on a little more than it can chew off. It might be biting more than it can chew. So that is my concern here, and I hope they can come, whatever decision or whatever compromise they come to with the teams and all the stakeholders. I hope it is a successful one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want a lot of new components and a plethora of new items introduced to Formula One, and the teams struggle to deal with it. And whatever the outcome of that struggle may be, you don't want that. Some teams might want to leave Formula One altogether. Some might find it difficult to maintain the standard of racing and the standard of the cars, basically. So it's it's as you said, it's absolutely vital for Formula One to select a direction and go into that direction with eyes wide open, and just not take everything at once.
Yep, and I think F1 is at a similar crossroads like Formula E, where it is in a bit of an identity crisis. A lot of people wanted to go more electric, a lot of people wanted to still remain with the combustion side of things, and explore alternative fuels. So that is also something that the F1 circus needs to answer for itself. Where does it really go? How long are they going to stick with this new power unit? What is the, let's say, 10-15 year plan for F1?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess once again we will have these discussions over and over in Formula One. These, I mean, 2026. Then there will be a 2032 or 35 regulations or whatnot. So it's going to be an interesting time, and but again, Formula One needs to find a direction which suits both, like, all the stakeholders and the sustainability part of it as well. So it's going to be very interesting, because
Yep.
once if Formula One does not stick to the sustainability part, it might get outdated, and if it does not stay with its stakeholders, it might get left behind by the stakeholders. So it's going to be interesting, and Formula One being the pinnacle of motorsport, being the leaders of motorsport in a way, it's vital that they make the right decisions than, like, they make more correct decisions than any other motorsport on the planet.
Yeah, yeah, there is definitely some truth to that. But yeah, that's all from my side. Without anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up this podcast?
Well, since we are talking about the future and we are talking about sustainability, I have uh, a wild idea. I had not shared it with you yet, but it goes like this. So we all
Yeah,
we
that's
all
gonna be interesting.
we all know that Formula One. I mean, it's not some anything out of left field or whatever, but we all know that Formula One will need to rotate circuits in the near future, right? So, like, there would be interest from 32 odd circuits, and I don't think like, we have 23 races now, but in the future I don't think they'll want more than 22 or 23 races again. So how do you rotate them, and how do you make sure that you get your milk like money cows circuits, and you get your traditional circuits, and you get your new market circuits, right? So just break it up into 3 or 4 tiers. You have one tier of marquee circuits, where you have Monza, Silverstone, and the likes, and rotate amongst them. Then you have one tier of your cash cow circuits, like the Middle East, like Miami, like Singapore, maybe, and you rotate among them. And then you have your emerging markets, like potentially India and South Korea in the future, potentially Kalami if it comes to fruition, and then you rotate amongst them. So let's see. I mean, it's just a shower thought basically, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for now, Vedant, obviously this is definitely conjecture, and I will point you back to the conversation we had with Kunal Shah on this spot, on here, and like he said, I don't think F1 is in a powerful place in terms of where it wants to go racing, and I think Stefano Domenicali has also come out and said that it, if the traditional circuits, if the marquee circuits cannot put up the money, then yes, we will not go racing there. And I think that is what we need to understand. And as fans who love traditional circuits, it is a hard fact to accept, but it seems that is the way the future will be. Where uh, I don't want to say money will be king, but F1 will go uh, where the where the people wanted to go essentially, and that is where people are willing to invest money. So, and especially with the new crop of fans that F1 has, I don't think they are buying into the same conversation or the same perspective that we might have had growing up. Watching these races for 10, 15 years. So I think we are engaging with a different beast altogether, and we have to in a way let go of the idea of holding on to what has been so dear to us for so long. Uh, I mean, it pains me to say that, but that is the reality of the situation, and I think Kunal pointed it out pretty well in our conversation with him. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Vedant, about Formula One as always, and we'll catch you on the next one.